Right. Is Drew with us?
No, he's not yet, but I'll keep
Okay.
an eye out.
All right. Well, chapter 6, we finished up 2 weeks ago and did the exercises. And that chapter was focused on the nominative and accusative cases. Nominative being the subject of the sentence, accusative being the direct object. And we studied the endings, the case endings for both singular and plural for all three genders. And then chapter 7, we filled in the rest of the cases, the two middle ones, I like to think of that as that, genitive and dative. And those were the cases that had to do with possession. And remember, he introduced the concept of keywords in chapter 7. The key word for the genitive case, do you recall what that is?
For the genitive case?
For the genitive. Of, yes.
Yeah.
That's the case that shows possession. And the dative case had several key words. Do you remember what they were?
To,
Yes.
in, and with.
Yes.
For.
And I added a fourth one, the word for, F-O-R. And the dative, one of the functions of the dative is to display the indirect object. Do you remember he had that sentence in English? Brad threw, I can't remember it. Oh. Threw the ball to somebody.
Brad threw George the ball, something like that.
Yeah.
Could say Brad threw the ball to George.
Here it is. Karen threw Brad a ball.
Okay. Karen did the throwing. All right. Karen threw Brad the ball. So Karen, subject, nominative case, threw is a verb. Brad, she didn't throw Brad because he's an indirect object. She threw the ball.
Maybe she's a lot stronger than he thought.
Well, maybe she is. Hi, Drew. And so the ball is in the accusative case, and Brad, Karen threw Brad. Yeah, Brad is the indirect object. That would be the dative case. Now, we often, we would say it's an equivalent statement. Brad threw the ball to, no, Karen threw the ball to Brad. We change it into a prepositional phrase with to as the preposition. That's an equivalent way of stating it. So that's the key word to that you see. It transforms the dative into a prepositional phrase. And I think I diagrammed it last week. All right. He also gave us some, well, we had some paradigms that he wanted us to learn. We're in the stage of getting familiar with them right now. I want you to memorize two paradigms. One of them is the article, and that's listed in the full form on page 57. We'll talk about that in a minute. But the other paradigm, I suggested that we memorize the paradigm of the nouns on page 56. But I'm having second thoughts about assigning that to you. I think I'd rather assign the bare case endings on page 55. He makes a good case for learning the case endings separately from the stem. And his reasoning, I think, is sound. If you memorize it as part of the word, you're less likely to see the true form, because sometimes there's combinations that kind of mask their identity. So,
What do you mean by combinations?
well, all right, if you compare, do you see 7.8, the paradigm there? That's the endings by themselves. I call it the bear case ending.
Yeah.
And then if you compare that to the paradigm on the next page of the full word,
Yeah.
logos, raphe, hora, and ergon. It's hard for me to distinguish between the blue ending and the black stem.
I prefer
yeah.
the vowel endings, the table right above it. The paradigm above it seems really complete, because then we know about the vowel changes also.
Yeah, well,
And I need to know that.
that vowel, that's called the connecting vowel or the stem vowel added to the bear case ending.
Well, but for like the dative singular, it's been changed, and the only way I know that is by remembering that.
Mhm.
I mean, if I just know it's iota, then I
Yeah,
wouldn't remember that.
well,
So I have to know that table there.
yeah, his footnote 6, I think, explains why that happens.
Yes.
In the singular, first and second declension, the iota will always subscript. That's something that we need to remember anyway. But if it would help you to learn that paradigm that has the stem vowel connected to the ending, do so. But I still want you to know what the bear case ending is.
Oh, yes, we'll know that. But the genitive plural, it
Mhm.
also changes, and there is no subscript. Because it's still, the vowel changes, it just doesn't subscript it. I mean,
Right. Well, the
There's no
iota
iota.
is the only vowel that subscripts.
right, I didn't say that very well, but
Well, in the genitive plural, you notice he's got the omega underlined. That's his shorthand notation for, that's the result of combining with the Omicron.
right.
Let me ask you, and I have to point it out because of the way it's strong. But I'm assuming when he says it subscripts, he's referring to this, correct?
Yes. Mhm.
That's what I thought. And what's the proper pronunciation? Because I've seen this written and I haven't heard it pronounced yet.
Okay.
What's the proper
The
pronunciation
iota,
when you see that?
the subscripted iota does not affect the pronunciation at all. It's pronounced exactly the same as an alpha or an eta or an omega by itself.
Okay.
But it's important to know because it tells you that it's dative case, dative singular.
Okay. So it's only a case indicator.
So
Right.
Okay.
Does not
We-
affect
we
pronunciation.
looked this up because it was
Okay.
disturbing to me that they were doing this and didn't understand what was going on. We actually looked this up. The
Okay.
manuscripts, the ancient manuscripts were not consistent. There were multiple ways this was done.
Ah,
Some manuscripts, most of the manuscripts had the iota written out, but the pronunciations, and how do we know this? Because actually the Byzantine philologists created this subscripting paradigm.
wow.
The Byzantines
Like 1200.
in 1200 AD came up with this to standardize a non-standardized mode of writing.
I didn't know.
Yeah,
any of
because
that.
it was bothering me, like,
And
what
a
is
lot of-
happening?
Some of the majesties, right?
Mhm.
It would be a full iota. written,
Yes.
But it wasn't always consistent. Sometimes it might be left off, sometimes it might be included, sometimes it might be included like smaller.
Yeah.
Like, and the Byzantines, when I think working with probably the older texts, they're philologists in 1200 turned it into a subscript so that they had a standard way of
Okay.
copying the text.
Well, in all the 25 plus years of me studying this stuff, I never knew that. And the books that I've read never mentioned any of that. So I don't have as much curiosity, Dave, as you do.
Well, when something bothers me, I've got to unravel it. So I don't know if that helps you to understand why.
It does, because I mean, and everything, this is something that I've learned long ago as a kid, and most people don't seem to grasp it, but everything is logical and makes sense.
Right.
And if it doesn't seem to make sense, it indicates either you're missing some key fact that if you knew it, it would put everything else
Right.
in the proper order, or one of your basic assumptions is invalid. And if you change
Right.
one of your basic assumptions, everything else will make sense,
Yeah.
or some combination of both of those.
So,
Well,
so
does
we
it
have, so we
satisfy
have,
you
yeah,
now?
yeah, I'm thrilled. It's thrilling to find that out because the Byzantines, there's enough writing there that we know what they were doing and why they did it.
Okay.
Now, I don't know if that answered our question about the change to the stem vowel dad, but it did, since about the treatment of the iota.
Yeah.
They didn't, I don't think that article
Yeah,
talked
so
about
what
the
you
stem
say,
vowel,
this was
but-
where I was missing a fact, and you filled in my fact.
Actually,
Did it?
actually they were related because
Uh-huh.
it is actually it goes back to classical and pre-classical Greek that they started to change vowels and words to elongate them is really old. But then they changed somewhere between pre-classical Greek and somewhere after that, somewhere in the classical period, they changed the same article talked about it. They
I think you're
changed the
right.
pronunciations. Now, I don't know how they know they changed them, but they
Well,
did.
you're getting into stuff that's way deeper than this book treats. And we don't
Right.
have to know that.
No, we don't.
But
It helps me to understand because when we're talking about a dead language and people say, this is what it is, it's like, well, how do you know that? Because I mean,
Yeah.
and when will it matter to us and why do we bother? You know,
Well,
why not just drop
Yeah,
the
and
subscript completely? It would
And I
still
know
be
for
the
me,
same.
if I understand how things got to the way they are, it helps me remember them.
yeah, well, that's true.
Yeah, because
Yeah, because we're inheriting.
no,
older
I understand.
philology.
Well,
That's
no, the
cultural.
reason it matters. So if we're all reading after the Byzantines, if we're all reading Greek, which we pretty much are going to be reading, if we look at any Greek, it's going to be something that came after the Byzantines.
Yeah.
There's no actual difference. And you can say, yes, it's in the dative case, and that's how I know it's in the dative case, as opposed to, but if you look at the words, like if you look at dative case versus all the other cases, you really don't run into a distinct, I mean, just knowing it ended in omega.
In first declension, it matters because it doesn't change to an omega. You end up with the
What?
eta and the alpha, same in dative singular as nominative singular, but
That's the only one where it matters.
The subscript.
Yeah, that one it actually would make a difference.
I don't
But
see what you're looking at, right?
Well,
Oh, sorry, on page 56,
The-
if you look
the
at
endings,
the
that
first
top form, which is
declension.
why I like that top form, because it really tells me everything. Because
Okay.
it tells me the vowels. So if you look at the nominative singular declension on the feminine alpha versus the dative singular, there the iota subscript matters. And the same so for the feminines, it matters,
Mhm.
the eta subscript. But for like the omega, the omicron going to omega, you wouldn't matter. And so it helps us to understand. That's why I like this one. I'm going to use this because it tells me everything I
Okay.
know. I've got the ending and I've got the vowel change and I've got the subscript. I know all of it. This is how it will appear. If I only memorize that it's iota, then I've got to remember, oh yeah, well, this other rule, but now I've got them all because the fact that it's an iota subscript means that I know that it changed. I mean, it's all
Okay.
there.
I will mention this, and he mentions it in the book too. Some of the older grammars don't they don't consider that the case ending that he lists here, the bare case ending in 55,
Mhm.
they combine it with the stem vowel
Mhm.
and call that the ending. In other words, what you
Okay.
see on top of
Okay.
56. When I learned Greek 25 or so years ago, it was with a different book, and they considered the ending to be this what you
Right.
see there with the connecting vowel.
Right.
But Mounts separates the two. And I
Sure.
think he's got a good reason for doing it. Because if you learn those bare case endings and know the rules on why they change,
Where does it help you? Where do you ever actually use that?
maybe
It's a-
not right
It's a
here.
different memory structure.
No, I understand, but where do you ever actually use the ending without the vowel stems?
Well, we're learning some nouns that are very regular,
Mhm.
but there are a lot of irregular nouns.
And we're gonna have to memorize those
Yeah.
too.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
they might change in different ways than these do.
Yeah.
I
So
know.
the,
And I'm gonna say, I don't,
But
I don't know that this would apply to Greek, but I know so far the grammatical structure of this is very, very similar to Russian. And I know that when I learned Russian, I learned the declensions just with the actual declined ending, the consonant or vowel, whichever it happened to be as a declined ending. And it was like a red flag sticking on me going, I looked at the end of the word first to see what it was, and then I go to the beginning of the word to read
Yeah.
the rest of the word.
Right,
And that told me exactly what it was doing in the sentence.
sure.
And so that last letter was, and sometimes it was a 2-letter combo in Russian.
Well,
But
it's here too.
that's where I started reading every word.
Um,
I would
That's
go to
fine.
actually, and
So
sometimes
this is
Russian
just
words have
however-
prefixes that tell you. So it was weird because you would go to the beginning, to the end, the beginning, and then the middle to figure it out.
Yeah.
You know,
we're gonna have that in
I
Greek
guess
too.
what I'm
Yeah.
saying is, whatever works for you to remember
Yeah.
it, all the information is in that top table. All of the information's there.
Okay,
yeah, just as a question.
Yes.
So then would we encounter nouns where the bare case ending would still be there, but like the stem vowel would have changed differently than
possibly.
what we're saying?
I can't think of a case right now, but as we get into things, you'll see,
Okay,
you know, I'll have to ask you to just trust me on this.
Yeah,
got it.
got it.
All right, well, I do want you to memorize verbatim the article
Yeah,
paradigm.
that's really important.
I'm kind of undecided about what else I want you. Tell you what, let's just, I want to have a quiz next week on the article paradigm.
Okay.
Let's leave it at that. I want you to be real familiar with these other paradigms. And I want you to know some of the rules that he has in the footnotes here about the bare case ending. I would like the dative singular shows an iota, but it's not subscripted in this paradigm. But he says it will subscript in the always subscript in the
The data.
in the dative singular. Yeah. All right. Enough on that, I think. He has 3 more noun rules. I'm looking at the halftime review.
Right.
We talked about the keywords of for genitive, to, in, with, and for dative. And he says the most important paradigm to memorize is 711. Okay, he's shown, okay, that's the whole ball of wax there. That's got the article and the full word. He shows you the steps of how he got to that. I'm going to be satisfied, I think, for us to just memorize the article paradigm for next week. We might go back and memorize a little more afterward. But
We have
the
to
point
know,
is to get familiar with these paradigms.
we have to know about the dative subscripts
Yeah,
in order to,
it subscripts in the singular, but not in the plural.
yeah.
Okay, then he's got 3 more noun rules. The first 3 he gave us in chapter 6, and 3 more. Number 4 is just about the iota subscripting in the dative singular. 5 vowels often change their length, and the term for that is ablaut. And by length, he means Omicron is the short O, and omega is the long O. Very often, the Omicron will lengthen to omega, or the alpha might lengthen to eta. When that happens, that's called ablaut. And then rule number 6, in the genitive and dative, the masculine and neuter will always be identical to each other. Footnote 8. This may lead you to think that the masculine and neuter forms are more closely aligned than the masculine and feminine. As you'll see in chapter 10, the masculine and feminine are actually more similar. Well, chapter 10 is where we learn third declension nouns, and I don't want to get into that yet. So just reserve your questions until we get there. But he just made that statement about in the masculine and neuter, in the genitive and dative, the masculine and neuter will always be identical. And you can see that if you look at the paradigm on the preceding page. To lagu and to ergu. The endings of both the article and the noun itself are identical to each other. Look at dative. To lago and to ergo, they match. And if you look at the plural, same thing. Tone lagon and tone ergon, they match. And tois lagois and tois ergois, they match each other. This is true in the second declension. I can't say that it's going to be true in the third declension.
Well, okay.
And while we're looking at these and comparing, notice, I think it was one of the noun rules in chapter 6, the neuter, nominative and accusative always match each other. This is true of the neuter gender for all declensions, even third declension. That helps in memorizing too, to remember that the nominative and accusative singular match each other, and the nominative and accusative plural match each other in the neuter case only, or neuter gender only. It's true of the noun and the article. Okay, there's only 2 more rules to learn, and you'll see them in chapter 10 on the third declension nouns. Okay, I remember this is about as far as we got last week. We didn't read this halftime review.
Right.
And then he talks about partially declined words. Certain words are not fully declined, or else they follow rare patterns. This is especially true of proper nouns. Instead of listing all these separate paradigms, you'll be told about the differences as you meet them. And he's got one paradigm here of Jesus. See, it's got the nominative is a unique form. The genitive and the dative they match each other in the noun, and the accusative is unique. But there are a lot of them that don't change at all. All 4 cases are identical.
So in this one, it doesn't follow the declensions we've learned.
The only place it does not follow is in the genitive and dative
Right. Well, okay.
of the noun.
Yeah.
In,
Okay, I'm
so it does follow in the other cases. Yeah, it looks like the dative of the name Jesus it looks like that's genitive, but it's actually genitive and dative.
Right.
How can you tell the difference between the dative and genitive? Correct. The article that precedes his name will tell you. So rarely will you see a name without the article. I mean, it's most likely you'll have the article there to help you. And I remember a statement he made in a previous edition of the book. He said, the article is our friend. You pay attention to the article and it will keep you straight.
Is the inconsistency?
I can't hear Drew.
Oh, I'm sorry. I need to turn
Sorry.
you up.
Sorry.
Okay, what'd you
Is that
say,
better?
Drew?
Oh,
Is the inconsistency in names partly due to a lot of the names we encounter in the New Testament are not Greek names? Do Greek names decline a little bit smoother?
I haven't noticed that phenomenon. I think
Okay.
that's true of most names.
Okay.
Most names, I believe, are
Declinable?
Declinable.
indeclinable. Yeah.
Okay.
Um,
Interesting.
all right. Now he's going to talk about alternate first declension pattern. If you look at the paradigm on page 57, 7.11, you notice that some of the feminine first declension in the singular have an eta as the connecting vowel, and others have alpha. But in the plural, they all have alpha as the connecting vowel. So that's why he's got two different columns. And I wish he had filled in the plural of hora. I wrote that in my book.
understood.
Anyway, now he's going to tell us about that alternate first declension pattern. Oh no, wait a minute. This is another thing. In some of the alpha nouns, they'll switch in the singular. Some of them will have eta, others will have alpha. That's a different situation. But here's what I'll just read this. There are 36 first declension words in the New Testament that shift their final stem vowel in the genitive and dative singular from alpha to eta. Doxa is one of the most common examples of it. Doxa is the nominative. Doxase is genitive. Doxa with an iota subscript is dative, but then it goes back to alpha in the accusative.
So really, in this table here, we should be noticing the genitive and dative singular. That's the thing that's weird.
That's
about
right.
docs.
Yeah, that's the weirdity.
That's the only thing is the genitive and dative.
Yeah, the vowel switches from
Singular,
alpha to
yes.
eta.
Singular.
Whereas with like hora, it would have been alpha still.
Yeah,
Now-
I should not have. I don't.
Now,
I might have confused you.
this is, I mean, I read this ahead and it says, now below it is the thing that's actually really interesting. Here's the rule.
Yeah,
You're reading.
yeah. If a first declension word has a stem ending in alpha, where the preceding letter is epsilon, iota, or rho, it will form genitive and dative singular with an alpha. Otherwise, the alpha will shift to eta. Well, doxa, the letter preceding the alpha ending, is exceed. It's not one of these three, epsilon, iota, or rho. So it will shift. It doesn't stay the same.
So when I read that, I thought, well, it would seem like then what he's taught us is the standard is probably less common than the thing, because all other things would do this.
it seems like that, but I think, as it turns out, most words do not.
Have- Okay,
Most words do
have one of those three.
one of those three
Okay.
as the second last letter.
How
So
peculiar.
the majority of words will not do this thing. He stated it in a weird way, I think, but.
Well, I mean,
It's-
it's actually stated rather well because,
Yeah,
I mean,
it's not the way I would have
but
expected.
it's the opposite in the sense that he taught us the exception and made it as if that's the standard.
Yeah,
But that's because in terms of usage, it's what's most common in
That's
our. in our
right.
Yeah, I was
bilingual
gonna say that
transcripts.
maybe the difference is the difference between how frequently does something appear in the New Testament versus how
Exactly.
frequently does it appear in vernacular Greek on the street.
yeah, maybe
Right.
so.
Yeah. I don't
Okay,
know. Maybe words just don't have those
And is-
letters in them.
Is the reason for the vowel shift the typical sort of reason, just pronounceability?
I haven't thought of that. Uh,
Most commonly
No,
vowel
I
shifts are
think you
for that
could-
reason.
Maybe so, but look at doxa. It's easy enough to pronounce it, all of those with
Yeah.
an alpha. Doxos,
Yeah.
doxa, doxa, doxon.
Yeah, it would be just
Huh.
the same. It doesn't seem difficult. Odd, isn't it?
But in the plural, he says, where does he say? All feminine plural stems end in alpha regardless of their form in the singular. But now, the genitive plural, this is for all genders. Omega nu is going to be the ending. That
Gender
has to
plural.
do, we're going to get this later on in, I think it's chapter 15. It's a chapter on contractions of vowels. And weird things seem to happen, and we're not going to get a good explanation until we get to that chapter. I'm looking. But if you can hold off until then for getting explanations of contractions, like I showed you that on the bare case ending, he's got the omega underlined in all three genders for the genitive plural. That's his shorthand notation for saying that a contraction has occurred, which results in omega nu. So don't ask about that until we get to the contractions. Because it's way too involved for us at this point.
Right.
And then he's got a final paradigm here on autos. In the last chapter, you learned that autos in its masculine singular means he, the feminine aute means she, and the neuter auta means it. Notice auta is a different pattern than the new ending that we learned. Remember ergon? That was the neuter singular, nominative or accusative. So this is a different pattern for the neuter singular, nominative, and accusative. But it's a frequent enough pattern that we'll see other words that do the same thing. But here's the whole paradigm for autos. In the singular, it's he, she, or it, or him, her, and it. In plural, it's they or them.
I don't remember if we talked about this, but what's the use case for the neuter plural? If we're referring to like a group of cows, that would be neuter plural, right?
Okay.
Whereas if you had a mixed group of people, would that be neuter or would it be masculine? I've seen languages.
Masculine, most likely.
Masculine.
I can't think
Okay.
of any examples right now where you'd have a group of things where neuter is one of the things?
Okay.
Most of the time, it's masculine mixed with feminine.
The Unix room in a court?
Well, but I mean, but wouldn't you, I guess, if you had most words, nouns have many nouns, I assume, have a neuter declension.
Yeah,
And so if they have a neuter declension, then the article that goes with them would be neuter.
that's right.
So I don't know, I can't remember
Well-
which words have neuter declensions, but
Well,
if
this
it-
is the pronoun, not the article, though.
Yeah. Well, here's
okay,
But
but if it's
something.
a collection, if you had just said pencils and that's neuter, I
Yeah.
don't know. You would then use the neuter, I would think, when you said them.
Right.
Sure.
That's in English, you do that. Now, this might help your question, to answer your question. There are several places in scripture where they have a list of all kinds of nouns, and they talk about them collectively as a group. And I'm thinking of, for example, the fruits of the Spirit. Every one of those 9 are in the feminine gender. But when you talk about them collectively, you use the neuter.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Because they're concepts rather than gendered
Well,
things, even
they're-
though they don't decline that way.
I don't think the word concepts is really the right word to use. They're abstract nouns, for instance.
Sure.
Love, joy, peace, long suffering, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, temperance. And another example is in 1 Corinthians 13. Now abide faith, hope, love, these 3, but the greatest of these is love. Those 3 also are feminine. Agape, elpis, and pistis. Hope is elpis and agape. Tauta, tauta tria, these 3. And tauta is the neuter plural, referring to the collective group of feminine. And then there are some groups which have a mixture of feminine and masculine. And the pronoun referring to the group of them is also neuter. That's common in Greek to do that. The neuter is used for a lot of things that you wouldn't expect it to be used for. But we got to wait until we get to that.
Okay.
Getting ahead of ourselves. Okay. Next page, 60, detective work. Ray, you want to read that for us, please?
One way to approach parsing is to think of it as a detective game. Some case endings occur in only one location. For example, lagus must be accusative plural. It cannot be anything else. A subscripted iota must be dative singular. These are the easy endings. But other endings can occur in 2 or more locations and may require more detective work. It is important to know which endings fit in which category. For example, erga can be nominative or accusative plural. The noun horas can be genitive singular or accusative plural. Translation. Hints for translating genitive and dative forms. Be sure to use your keywords when you translate a word in the genitive or dative. Whenever you see a noun, do not stop, but look further to see if there is a word in the genitive following it.
Let's read this together.
Lagos,
tu
theu,
sose, sukas.
sukas.
So the first 2 words, well, that's the article. Logos we know is word, but don't stop there. Look a little further. Tu theu tells us that kind of belongs together. The word of God.
Yeah.
Now remember, tu theu, you don't translate the 2 there because with proper names, proper nouns, you'll often have the article in Greek, but English doesn't require it. So we don't translate that, but you do translate it, the keyword of, because that's the genitive case ending. So the word of God. So say is the verb, will say, sukos, that's the accusative
Mhm.
single,
It's the indirect
plural.
object.
Yeah, that's the direct object. Very good.
So that is the lexical form then sukkah.
Suke, really.
Oh, okay. It is.
And in fact, I believe that's a neuter. No, pneuma is neuter. Suke is first declension feminine. And by the way, that's not the natural gender. We think of souls in English as a neuter, but it's feminine in the Greek.
Okay.
Okay, as you divide.
As you divide the sentence, you already know to keep the article with the noun it modifies. You will also keep the genitive and its article with the noun it modifies. O logos, to deo.
So, yeah, see, he's putting slash marks between the different parts where you
Yeah.
would divide the sentence. Okay, I think he made a good.
So like, yeah, the first, before the first slash mark, subject, and then we would call the rest of it predicate.
Yeah.
Verb, subject.
And direct
Right.
object.
Now, last week I diagrammed some sentences, and from time to time, I would like to diagram things because to me, it's helpful to see it visually, the structure of the sentence. I won't bother to do that this time. Then we have vocabulary. I usually assign that for you to do on your own, but I've noticed that every class I've taught, that gets relegated to the last priority. And we don't learn the vocabulary very well. So I think maybe we'll take the time to look at this vocabulary together. Okay. And I'd also like from time to time to have a vocabulary quiz. And the way we do it is orally, and you grade it yourself. But I'll just call out a word and let whoever gets it first. Okay. Hamartia. Now the os and the second piece of information here is the genitive singular. What he gives in the lexical form is always the nominative singular. But the genitive singular is necessary too to learn. And you would just replace the alpha there with the alpha sigma, or another way to say it is just
So
add
this
the
is
sigma.
the first
And that's
declension form.
the first declension.
Yeah,
And it's feminine because the form of the article is feminine. Those three pieces of information are what will be given us, what we need to learn for a noun.
So this one is the one that follows that rule that doesn't have an eta, iota, or rho,
Yes,
right? So
and
that's
therefore
why
it
it's
will
the
not
as.
shift.
Won't shift.
It
Right.
won't shift. That's why it's the as and not the,
That's right.
I'm sorry, the
Okay,
ace.
so that second ending, right, that's the
Just follow it.
dative, right?
No, they don't. They're not going to show the dative, only the nominative and genitive, and then the
Right.
article.
Sorry about that. I meant.
Okay. You do need to learn the article with the noun, because that tells you what the gender is. And then he's got the stem listed here with an asterisk in front of it. In this case, the stem happens to be identical to the lexical form. It's not always true. And remember,
Right.
go back to the bare case ending paradigm, page 855. you see on nominative singular feminine, it's just a dash there.
Right.
That's what we're seeing here with this word. That means that the lexical form, the hamartia, and the stem, hamartia, are identical because there's no ending. He shows it as a dash. Okay, next one.
Hang on, before you go on, looking
Yeah.
at the footnote there prompted a question. I'm jumping
All right,
ahead
sure.
again. But this begs the question, since hamartia is both a specific act and a generic concept, does Greek follow the pattern that I think most every other language I've seen has, where you find verbs that are derived from the noun form? So there's going to be later on another word that is derived from hamartia or similar to it that it means to sin.
Yes.
Okay.
Hamartano, I think is the
Okay.
word.
So.
Yeah.
So that's something to look for down the line.
Well, yeah.
So
And we have it in English, the word love is
Right.
both a noun and a
and
verb.
every language I've ever encountered does that. So I figured
Yeah.
Greek probably did too.
Yeah,
but-
it does. But with Greek, though, it might be a different form.
Right, I'm sure the structure would be different, but the basic idea is
Yeah,
the same,
mhm,
that
yeah.
there are nouns, verbs, and adjectives that,
Right, adjectives too. There are,
like sinful, there would probably some adjectival form of
yeah,
hamartia, which would mean sinful.
yeah. Mhm. Now, also in this footnote, it says it describes both a specific act of sin as well as the concept of itself, sin and sinfulness. I remember studying 1 John 1:9. And in the context, you've got verse 8 and verse 10 with it. And I think I did one of these word studies on it. But verse 8, if we say that we
Have no
have
sin.
no sin, let's look at it. I don't want to get it wrong. This is King James.
If I say that I have no sin, I am a liar. I mean,
Yeah,
right?
that's true.
I mean, well,
Yes.
that's one of the cases where it's probably a singular form,
Well,
but
1 John 1:8. Okay, if we say that we have no sin, we deceive ourselves.
Yeah.
And the truth is not in us. Then verse 9, we know about confessing sin. In verse 10, if we say that we have not sinned. So verse 8 talks about the noun sin. If we say that we have no sin. Verse 10, if we say that we have not sinned. That's a verb.
Mhm.
So what's the difference here about sin in the singular noun, a singular noun, and the verb have not sinned?
Well, it would be that once you go back to the infinitive, it would be to sin,
mhm,
as opposed to simply sin in the nominative form. And once you conjugate it into past, I think this is past perfect or past pluperfect, but I think it's past perfect. It's have not sinned,
okay.
have sinned. I guess let's have sinned would be the verb, not as just a negative.
Well, I was thinking in a little different direction. If we say that we have no sin, I think that's talking about the sinful nature that we have. Whereas verse 10, if we say that we have not sinned, that's individual
Oh, I see what
acts
you're
of
saying.
sin.
or So I have to posit this question. Is there actually any difference between saying I have a sinful nature and saying that I have a sin? I mean,
Well,
if I say I'm thankful that God forgives me of my sin, you could read that, understand that to mean I'm thankful he forgives me of every single sin I've ever committed, or that he forgives me of my sinful nature. And I guess what I'm saying is that's like dividing a line that doesn't really exist, because if I have a sinful nature, I'm going to continue to sin. And so they mean the same thing. I have a sinful nature. I'm glad that he forgives me of my sinful nature and he changes me. Now, there's more to say about that, but
well,
Here's the thing, doctrinally, where you're getting wrong is that the truth is not that once we become Christians, we have no sin.
I never
We
said
still
that.
have sin. Our sins we have been justified of our sin.
I didn't say anything doctrinally wrong.
Right. So I
No,
think
you
what
didn't.
then John is saying here is different. If I understand this right, and again, I'm basing this off of a translation, not off the original Greek. But I think what this was saying, if the translation is a good translation, is John was saying, if we say that we never had sin,
Oh,
in other words, had no need
but
to
that's
be
actually,
saved.
what is the actual, well, okay, now we're.
But
getting
now
into
I don't know what John originally said there.
But no, what is the actual English? Read that.
The King James's translation was, if we say that we have no sin.
Yeah,
In
it's
other words,
not
in
past
present
tense.
tense.
It's in
And that's
present tense.
And that's what I'm saying. I suspect maybe the King James isn't that precise a
We'll
translation,
look
but
at
I'm
a
wondering
different
what
one. They're all in present tense. They're not past tense. That's an important statement I just made.
I guess here's the thing though. You know what? I'm betting though that this might be what's my favorite bugaboo for tenses? Is it actually,
Well,
I can't think of
kinda
the
got
word now.
we're getting
we're getting
pretty
far
afield.
afield.
Yeah.
We are.
I think we probably better say that for another.
Yeah.
I am curious about his statement of the concept of sinfulness. I guess what I'm positing is sinners sin,
Yeah,
and therefore they have sins. And so the concept statement of sin is indistinguishable. Sinfulness is indistinguishable from having a collection of sins. I mean, you can't make a distinction
I
that
would
has any
agree with
meaning.
that, Dave.
Okay.
But there's, I was thinking of the verse in Romans where, I think it's in Romans, where the babies that had not been born yet and hadn't done any sin.
Oh, yes, it's talking about Esau and Jacob.
Jacob
Sure,
and
yeah.
Esau, yeah. God said he loved loved Jacob and hated Esau.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to get into too much of that, but the fact is, even in the womb, these babies, having never committed any sin, still had a sin nature inherited from Adam. Because
Well, yes, I'm not disputing that, but how's that? Okay.
Well, so the sin nature is different from the acts of sin in that regard, because
all right.
they become sinners by inheritance from Adam. They don't become sinners by sinning. But they will sin because they have a sinful nature.
Okay.
That's the only distinction.
Right.
Needs to be made.
And in this translation, I guess what I'm getting to is that in the translation of this Greek,
Yeah.
I don't know that we could tell that it's saying one thing or the other.
Only in
fact,
the context. Only, yeah.
In the example you just described, they what is the exact words? Before they had any sin.
Yeah.
Well, then it doesn't mean a sinful nature. It
Well, yeah.
means they had not committed any sin.
They had not committed any acts of sin, but they had a sinful nature.
Well,
because another verse in Romans, as by one man's sin entered into the world.
Yes.
And death by sin, so sin passed on all men because all sin.
Okay.
We sinned in Adam.
So we have a theology that's built upon the entirety of Scripture. What I am not certain about is that we can pour specific theological statements into a particular word in the Greek. And I'm guarded against making that
Yeah.
assumption.
Well, we
Okay.
need to be careful how
Right,
we handle it.
that's all.
True.
And my statement is, in this case, I don't think it makes any difference.
The safeguards that we have, and we need, I think we're all aware of it. We can't isolate one verse.
Right.
Or one word of a verse and build a theology on it. We need to take into account all of Scripture that bears on that issue.
Sometimes in reading these notes, I have the sense that what Mounce is giving us is a theological statement about the translation of a word.
Probably, yeah,
And
in this case, I think he is.
And I'm a little reluctant to just jump right to that.
Be a Berean.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
That's something that it's an honorable thing to do that too.
Not that I disagree with his conclusion.
Yeah,
I don't.
You just want to be sure.
yeah. Well, that's what we're doing.
I want to be open to the original
Yeah.
autograph
Yeah,
in God's will.
I wish we had the original
Well, we
autograph.
don't.
Well,
Yeah.
In fact,
we
he's
very
going to
close.
say something here.
Yeah, I know what the word I was thinking of. I mean, I was wondering if the verb was an aorist,
Aries.
because
In-
then it could
In
possibly.
1 John 1:8 or 10.
In 1 John 1:8. Because then could that?
I don't think it is, but I can check it.
Because if it was, maybe it would have meant that we had not ever sinned, or include that.
Mouse's statement simpler in that you just quoted that in
What?
Romans saying,
Oh.
or through one man's
Sin entered into the world and
And
death.
I'm assuming from Mouse's statement, that would be the same word, hamartia, as to say,
Yeah,
for all have sinned.
That's- one's a verb, one's a noun.
Forgive my, if there were, an individual action statement, it's simply the same word in both contexts. It's
Yeah.
obvious and sin entered the world as conceptual of sin,
If
right?
this were simply true, then all the translations should translate it as sinfulness where that's what it means. But it's not. It's not translated that way
no,
because the
they're kind of
Greek
literal
didn't, it's not clear to me the Greek understood it exactly that way. I mean, we're splitting hairs, but it's a transition from a form of a noun to something a little different. And he's giving us here a theological statement where the actual translations don't translate it as sinfulness. And I think there's a reason they don't. It may mean that in many cases, we're looking at the entirety of all the collection of all the sin that we have ever committed and ever will commit. Is that sinfulness?
Yeah. You're talking about
No.
what was laid on Jesus on the cross.
Okay. And I would submit that technically that isn't sinfulness. But I won't disagree that it's impossible to tell the difference practically. Okay. That's the hair. And
Yeah.
he crossed that hair. That's all I'm saying.
Okay.
Because when you look at the translations, they don't say it's sinfulness, and they could easily have not have done that.
Well, let's continue with the vocabulary. Next word, arche. That's the lexical form. It's nominative. And the second piece of information is archase. Notice the accent changed from an acute to a circumflex. There's reasons for that. And the rules for accenting are so complex. I'm not going to, I don't want to teach those rules. That's for
Yeah.
second year students. That's it.
We'll
But
just
there
say-
are good reasons for it changing. And then hey is the feminine form of the article. That's a feminine noun as well. Now, the meaning of it is beginning. Remember that verse in the lexical.
So what?
Hmm?
Okay, I'm just looking at sorry, never mind. It doesn't, that rule doesn't apply because it's a, not
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, the meaning of that word arche is either beginning or ruler. Now those two words are very much different.
Well, I'm wondering, when it says, I'm wondering if they're as different as they seem, because I'm wondering, is arcane then similar in understanding to the Latin princeps?
Princeps,
Sure,
yeah,
right.
Princeps, probably so.
Probably first among all of those of
Yeah.
generally the same rank.
Yeah.
So then that could be thought of as beginning or leader or
Yeah.
ruler.
Yeah, that's, I think,
Yeah.
the same way
Yeah.
that those two words
And it's
developed.
the ruler, I mean, is that not where we get like
Okay.
archbishop,
Yeah,
arch?
yeah.
Well, that's
That's
what's
right.
in his note here.
yeah.
Oh, I-
Yeah.
That's
Oh,
what,
yeah,
that's what
that's
made me
footnote
think
10, yeah.
princeps.
Mhm.
Archbishop.
Yeah,
Okay.
he's the first of the number one.
Yeah, the
Person.
number one, the first two,
Yeah.
the first in preeminence
Mhm.
of all of those of roughly equal rank.
So
Remember
beginning,
that verse in
not
John
first.
1:1, in arche ein ha logos, in the beginning was the word, in arche.
Beginning first. It's interesting he uses the word beginning in his glyph instead of first. I mean, which are synonyms.
He just gave us a passage that's translated as in the beginning. It's the word arche,
Yeah,
First John, or John 1.
yeah. Okay, in the beginning.
Next word.
So I
gar.
guess
Oh,
probably then our English archaic is probably derived from the same idea, early or beginning.
I think so. I think so. That's an adjective based on that. Okay, next word, gar. This is a conjunction. Means for, almost all the time. It means for or then. And it's a postpositive word. You remember what that means?
It won't-
De
It
is
had-
another postpositive word.
Right, it won't appear
It
first in
can't,
the
it
Greek,
cannot
but
be
it's
the
always
first word of the
That's right.
sentence.
Yeah, usually the second.
But then in English translation, it often is the first.
Yes, that's
Gar.
right. It's just an
Gar.
oddity of Greek. Apen is not a noun, it's a verb. It's a particular form of a verb. And it means he, she, or it said. So it's third person singular. And this is an aorist, by the way. Apen is a third person singular. The frequency of this form is not included in the running totals because it's an inflected form. You'll meet its lexical form later. When we
that's
study
a-
verbs after chapter 15.
That stuff we don't understand that he said here. What do you mean
No.
it's aorist?
Aorist,
Aorist.
that's the name of a tense.
Oh, so
For your-
we're being giving a verb here without understanding it.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
But since this occurs in the exercises, he's telling us you're going to run across this all the time.
In order to give us exercises that are actually exercises, you have to
Yeah.
give us stuff.
Just for your curiosity, and since you mentioned it, Ray, the aorist tense is one of the past tenses that are available to the Greek. Aorist, the word comes from alpha is the negation of a word, like asexual reproduction.
Okay.
It means non-sexual reproduction. Aorist is alpha, and horao means horizon. It means without a horizon, literally. And the horizon is the limit between the earth and the sky, or the sea and the sky. So it's an unlimited is one, undefined is really the better way of thinking of that tense. It's an undefined action. It doesn't tell you whether it's an ongoing or continuous action, or whether it's repetitive, or whether it's a point action.
It's indefinite. We don't know when it happened.
Yeah,
Right.
indefinite, that's a good word.
Indefinite. And the reason I even brought it up is because I found that like 95% of the time when I encountered something that didn't translate the same in Spanish or English, and the pastor pointed out that it was a word that needed to be studied clear, and I went to look up and hear and what exactly it was almost like 95% of the time it's aorist. And
Right.
so I went,
It's very common, yeah.
So you're saying like that, the
it's
sin you just read out of that is actually an aorist?
Well,
But
Oh,
you
not
just-
not
No,
necessarily. I
no,
don't think
okay.
it
but
is.
I was just asking, was that particular verb in 1 John 1:8 in aorist?
Right,
Because if so, that might account for why we're having so much trouble wondering how that should be translated. Because aorist doesn't translate neatly into probably
no,
anything.
but it means we don't know when it happened. And it could have
Right, yeah.
happened all the time. I mean,
Yeah, and it
it's
could
one of
still
the,
be
it either
happening,
means
Yeah.
we don't know when or it's all
Yeah,
the time.
most,
and it could still even be ongoing.
Right, that's right.
no, it can't be ongoing.
It
That's
cannot be
another
ongoing?
tense, another tense. Has
So
that
aorist
concept.
cannot be ongoing.
No, it's,
What's that tense?
I thought it
It's-
could be.
it just means that it happened. It doesn't say.
Right, I thought it was without reference to whether it is ongoing or isn't ongoing.
You would use the present tense or the perfect tense if you wanted to describe an ongoing or continuous action. You would not use the aorist for that.
Okay, so the common one when Jesus says, I am, what is that tense?
It's present tense.
It's simple present tense.
Ego, eimi. Yeah, simple
But in the
present.
Greek, that is the simple present tense?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
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 We're not into verbs yet, but
Can I?
all right.
all right.
I promise this is more in the vein of where the book's going. So, oh, I'm sorry, we're at APIN, right? But we're about to get to ACE.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, okay, sorry, my question is about ACE. I didn't
Okay.
mean to jump forward.
APIN.
Next page, ace.
Hmm.
That's a preposition. Into or in.
Um,
Okay.
So here's my question.
All right.
Both with GAR and ACE, we have words here which are or part of the words in the gloss are some of the same words as the keywords of the dative case.
Oh, for,
You see what I'm saying? For and also in.
yeah,
Where are you?
okay. Yeah,
I'm
okay.
so-
I think I know what you're getting at.
What?
Do you see what I mean? So-
Yeah, our keywords for the dative
Right.
are to, for, in, or with.
Mhm.
And so for is, in English, for is used for so many different meanings.
Mhm.
It can be, this gar is for, not a preposition though, it's a conjunction,
Oh, okay.
different part of speech.
This is, so the for and then are conjunctive.
Yeah,
verb
conjunction.
use.
Yeah,
Okay, can I? okay,
Yeah,
so
go
then
ahead.
with ACE, that would be used in a prepositional phrase
yes,
in something.
yes.
And so then the noun in the case in which ACE would appear would not be in the dative? Or would? if
It could
first-
be.
Okay,
We're going to study, chapter 8 is prepositions.
okay, all right. I'm sorry.
Prepositions can be used with different cases. And
Okay.
then you would not use the keyword in a prepositional phrase. That concept of
Okay.
keywords is if it's the bare dative or bare genitive without it being in a prepositional phrase.
It's because we need prepositional phrases in English to represent this
Yeah,
function,
yeah.
right?
We convert
Right.
the dative case into a prepositional phrase,
Right.
but that's just,
I was
So-
just curious if in the Greek it can appear as a dative case or as a prepositional.
yes,
phrase.
it can.
Okay,
In fact, in classical period, they rarely use prepositional phrases. They
okay,
used the bare dative case
interesting.
or, but in time, languages change.
Right,
So this is a preposition.
Ace is a preposition, yes.
okay.
And by the way, I think I gave a handout last week of,
Yes, you did.
I kept a separate binder just for paradigms and vocabulary words. And here I'll give, this is what I gave out last week, Ray. That's,
I think I posted that last week.
yeah,
too.
and here's the vocabulary section.
Yeah,
And what I do on you can,
I was gonna say, well, I mean, I can get it off of the.
okay,
the-
either
the
way,
shared drive.
yeah.
Yeah.
What I do with all the vocabulary words, I list the part of speech, whether it's a noun.
Oh. He doesn't always.
No,
so
he
that's
doesn't.
Good. I need to look at your list.
Yeah.
I'll fix my cards.
Yeah. Gar in chapter 7
I think I need to get
is a
real lexicon.
conjunction.
Mhm.
Ace is a preposition. Well, that brings me to a question. Do you want me to make handouts of stuff that you post on the what do you call it? On
In Google Drive.
the Google, yeah, the thing that you're making available to everybody. You're putting these handouts on there, is that right?
I am putting, when you hand something out, I'm putting it up there, yeah.
Okay. Do you want me to make the paper handouts, or do you want everybody to use what you got on them?
Oh, I don't think it matters. If you bring
Okay.
it to class for
Yeah,
people,
I'll-
that's
I'll
helpful to
keep
Yeah, I
them.
mean,
Right,
there's
yeah.
probably some that like it. I mean, like, for instance, I like them electronically just because when I'm traveling, it's way easier just taking this than
Yeah.
all of that.
Oh,
Yeah,
sure.
right. So you have access to it.
Yeah.
Hold on.
Well, it is there. It will be there.
Well.
Okay. Exousia, exousias, hey. It's another feminine noun. In first declension, it means authority or power. Euangelion, euangeliou. Oh, that's a neuter noun of the second declension.
That's interesting. Good
It
news.
means good news or gospel. Now that's a compound word. The prefix
Yeah.
"eu" means good or well.
Angelion.
Angelion means message,
That's- Okay.
good message. See how that works?
Mhm.
I think he says that in the footnotes here. 12. An evangelist. Oh, and by the way, when they anglicized the word euangelion, we got the U changed into a V,
Yeah, evangel.
evangelist.
The German.
Oh, footnote 11, back on ace. In classical Greek, there was less overlap in meaning between ace, into, and n, in. But in Koine Greek, there is none. No, there is more, excuse me. More overlap. Eisegesis is poor hermeneutical practice because it reads the meaning into the text instead of drawing it out of exegesis of the text. That exegesis and eisegesis or eisegesis is a compound of ace, into, and ago, to lead into, or ex, out of, lead out of. Yeah, we want to exegete scripture, not eisegete scripture. Okay, next word, Jesus, Jesu is Jesus, masculine noun. You having trouble?
No, it's okay. Okay.
Kurios,
And that's the genitive it's showing us, right?
kuriou, yeah, that's the genitive singular form. And by the way, the reason we're learning genitive with it is not so much for these nouns that we're learning that are first or second declension, but when you get to third declension, chapter 10, it will become extremely important to know the genitive singular form.
If we got a regular lexicon, does it give all of the declensions on each of these? Because, for
It
example.
doesn't give the full declension,
Well,
but
for example, Iesu does not follow the dative. So you wouldn't know that if you looked it
it's
up.
not giving you data.
I understand, but
Okay.
the dative in Iesu, we were just told doesn't match
Oh,
the
right.
declension. So you would never know that if you looked at a lexicon.
No,
It
what
doesn't
you wouldn't
tell
know
you
that because
How
the
would you know?
lexical form of a noun only gives you those three pieces.
But that's not my question.
There-
Somebody knows that it declines differently than the first declension.
Yeah.
That's what we're
non-standard.
learning here. Now, I've got a book.
But I have to go back and
Because-
find it in my Bill Mounts textbook on chapter 7.
uh,
An authoritative reference should tell me that.
I think that's what.
That's what I'm
I
asking
was
you.
gonna- I think this is what we want, Carl.
This is what I want, is an authoritative book.
I've got.
That I don't have to go find it in Mounts's text somewhere.
Yeah. You won't find it in Mounts.
Well, no, I found Yesu in chapter 7, but
But randomly,
no,
Yeah.
that's not,
Yeah.
that's random.
Yeah.
273.
yeah.
So if we get a good lexicon, it will have that.
Complete vocabulary. guys.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Proper nouns, proper words.
If I come around and
Yeah.
look over
Yeah.
your shoulders.
You might want to get this at some
I
point,
think we
but
will.
here's all the names listed in the New Testament.
And all of the declining of all,
Well,
or the different cases.
it'll tell you,
No.
for instance, well, I don't think it gives you dative case.
Well, if you want to find Yesu,
Okay,
you want to understand.
um, wait a minute.
Right here.
There it is. Okay. Jesus, Jesu gives you only the nominative and the genitive and the article. That's standard.
What's on page 917?
917.
Oh, it just gives a number there. I was curious.
Oh,
is that
that's the
usage
count. The
Oh,
count.
okay.
Wow.
Is there a resource that would have all of the
The full
form
paradigm of the names.
every
Well, or the
all the-
exceptions at least, the ones that are different,
Yeah,
that don't
you could-
follow the rule. I mean, how
Right,
do
yeah,
you
you're
know?
looking for something that's.
I'm
has-
gonna write it on my index card, but I have my personal index cards are my
I've got another book.
authoritative reference.
You're looking for something that's it's as exhaustive for case endings as Strong's is for just
Yeah.
listing every place it appears.
Well, Mounts
So-
wrote another book, which I've got, I didn't bring it with me. I'll bring it next week. It's Morphology of Biblical Greek. And he gives, in fact, in this book, he also gives back here in his lexicon here for nouns, he gives a code number, which is keyed to his morphology of biblical Greek. And he gives a paradigm that's a pattern for all the same types of nouns or verbs that follow that pattern. So for
Okay.
instance, if it's a name, I'm not sure he does this with names, but he does it with verbs and with nouns. It gives a pattern and it gives a code number too, and all the nouns or verbs that follow that pattern have that same code number. I don't know if he does it for these partially declinable nouns. So the thing is, with
It
names,
doesn't matter.
most names are indeclinable. In other words, they don't
Right.
change.
Okay.
So the ones that do change, like Jesus, we ought to learn them.
And I would imagine that while we're translating, right, if we're to run into a name like Jesus that has some weird form, we'll usually have the article there. And what will make best sense in our translation will be
Yeah.
a
Go
form.
forward,
In fact, if that's a sticking point, we could come back to that after the rest of the sentence is making sense.
Yeah.
Right.
Pay
Right.
attention to the article more so than the form of the name.
Right. All right.
That's what'll help you.
I would imagine that's how Greek scholars figured that out to begin with.
I think so.
Yeah. So, all right.
Okay,
Doesn't matter.
next word, may, means not or lest. There's another form of not or lest, and that's ooh. I think we already learned that in chapter 6.
Yes,
Did we?
we did.
Yeah,
I
page 50.
forget what it was.
Ooh, ook, and ook.
Oh, that's it.
Yeah, that means not.
So how's this different?
So the reason he has another word for not is ooh and ook is used with let me get the word, indicative mood.
This is May.
The indicative mood is the mood of reality or
Statements.
perceived reality.
Declarations.
Declaration, making a statement. In narrative, such as the
Mhm.
Gospels, almost everything there will be in the indicative mood. And when you want to negate a statement, you would use ooh for the indicative mood. But all the other moods, imperative, subjunctive, optative, you would use may and not ooh. So it's just think of them as synonymous.
All right.
Which is why we have the lest there, I assume. Like a subjunctive statement, like lest I come and take away the stars or the candlestick, quoting from Revelation, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
Because that's
Actually,
subjunctive.
Yeah, that's a
Lest I do
contradicting
this.
statement.
yeah. Well, also you could translate later, so that not.
Mhm.
Okay. May has the same meaning as ooh, but is used in different situations that I'll discuss later. When ooh may occur together, they form an emphatic negation. No.
Uh-huh.
By the way, I did a study.
So
one of
that's
these.
that's like not only no, but never ever.
Yeah, right. In fact, a lot of the promises that are made by Jesus about salvation, he'll use that combination of ooh and may with the subjunctive mood to indicate the impossibility of it ever occurring. In fact,
Okay.
Like none of them will I lose or.
that's exactly
Yeah,
right.
That's
Yeah,
a good
Oh,
example.
I will.
Okay,
Remember
wow,
that-
Interesting. in that
Yeah.
context.
Yeah. And we have a hymn,
Sure is.
I'll never, no, never, no, never forsake. That's Hebrews 13:5, the last part of it. And it uses that ume with its subjunctive to say that it's impossible that I would ever forsake.
Wow.
Wow.
And I have one of the chapters in this book I gave you a copy of, talks about ume, all the places where it's used. I'm pretty sure it's in here.
Hmm. Wow, that's powerful.
Yes, it is.
That's powerful.
In fact, well, I don't know if I can make a statement like that, but I don't see it in, oh, emphatic negation, page 37 in this book. Ume,
Sorry, I left it on my desk then.
well,
Yeah, I don't have.
Yeah, that's sitting on my coffee table.
let me
in front of my
read
chair.
just a paragraph here. In our English language, we tend to steer clear of double negatives. They're usually not
Mhm.
considered good grammar. If we do use them at all, the two negatives cancel each other and we end up with a positive statement. An example of this might be, he told me that he wouldn't not come.
Yeah.
It's an awkward way to say it, but it has the effect of strengthening the positive statement. In effect, he's saying that there's no way he'd stay away. Another example is the colloquial statement, he didn't give me nothing. In addition to being bad grammar, it's really saying he did give me nothing.
Or something.
No,
No,
he did give me something.
Except that if
He did
someone
not
said
give
he
me
didn't
nothing,
give
so
me
he must have
nothing,
given me something.
if someone said he didn't give me nothing, I'd think they meant he didn't give them anything.
That's
Right.
right.
Because
We would
they,
say anything, not nothing.
yeah,
The correct way to say what he obviously meant is he didn't give me anything.
yeah.
Mhm.
Most of our mothers or elementary school teachers would have lost
Yeah.
no time in correcting us if we talked like that.
See, this is why it'd be a Russian, because in Russian, if you're negating something, you have to
Most
negate
languages.
everything in a sentence.
Oh, wow.
So you would have to negate the verb, you'd have to negate the object, you'd have to
That's
negate
awkward.
any of its modified. It is. It was
Wow.
really difficult, but I mean, then your sentence would come out in proper Russian grammar, would sound out something like, he did not give me nothing, never. He did not never give me nothing. Or something. Oh, not-
In the
I know
Greek,
in Spanish, it's an emphatic. You can
Yeah.
have a double negative there. So
No, there are not any no, there are not, no pencils in this room.
not no
Not
pencil.
no pencils, not in this room.
In the Greek language, however, two negatives aren't considered bad grammar and they don't cancel each other to make a positive statement. In fact, the strongest way to negate a statement of a future situation is to use the double negative ou may along with a verb in the aorist tense subjunctive mood. The following verses from the King James Version are all of the places in the New Testament where the ou may construction is used.
What's subjunctive?
Subjunctive is, here's an example. If I were you, I would
Yeah,
go
it's-
now.
No.
It's how it's what they, at the Defense Language Institute, they used to refer to as a contrary to fact statement.
Yeah, that's,
So it's he is not you. So then he's making a statement that is
Yeah.
contrary to the fact because he isn't you.
well, this is also, it's not only subjunctive that we're looking at here. This is a conditional clause, the if clause. In Greek, there are 4 classes of conditions, and that's the second class condition,
Mhm.
contrary to fact. But there are other classes of conditions, and I don't want to get into that. That's also second year stuff.
Oh, yeah.
But it is very interesting to me. But anyway, I made a statement here. Most of them are spoken by Jesus, the ume construction, and many of them have to do with the security of the believer's salvation. And these are marked with an asterisk.
Mhm.
So if you want to
Which is just
look
what
at
you
that
read.
sometime, these verses are really powerful, I think, especially the ones that,
could you give us just one reference?
oh, yeah. John 8:51 and 52.
Okay.
Verily, verily, I say unto you. Now, that verily, that's not the ume there, but that's another thing that emphasizes the importance of it. If a man keep my saying, he shall never see death. That never is the translation of ume. He shall not
Yeah. So it
see
probably
death.
could have been legitimately translated as he shall never ever see death.
Yeah,
Right. That's what I
Then
was-
said the Jews unto him, now we know that thou hast a devil. Abraham is dead and the prophets, and thou sayest, if a man keep my saying, he shall never taste of death. So they repeated the ume,
Mhm.
but they challenged his statement. Another one, let's see. Hebrews 8:12. For I will be merciful to their unrighteousnesses, and their sins and their iniquities I will remember no more. No is ume. I will not ever remember them.
So where's that?
That's Hebrews 8:12.
Quoting from Jeremiah.
Yeah,
right?
but there's
Yeah, that's Jeremiah, right?
Yeah,
right, yeah, Jeremiah 30.
yeah,
Um,
wow.
Hebrews 13:5. Let your conversation be without covetousness and be content with such things as you have, for he has said, I will never leave thee nor forsake thee. And that's the
Ume.
basis for that song. I will never, no, never, no, never forsake.
And constructions like that are why we call this language foreign.
Yeah. Okay, we've spent more time than we should have. It's, I know we started late,
Yeah.
Oh, well.
but finish that on your own, please. And I like that you're making your flashcards, David. That's really, really going to help, I think. But I think I share your frustration because you can't fill in every blank. And you're probably one of these guys that gets uneasy when you can't do that. I am.
I
am
like to
too.
understand a thing.
Well,
This is a lot to understand. I'm not going to
Mhm.
understand all of Greek.
no, I've taught this for years and I'm still learning new stuff every time I go through it. I forget a lot. I
So-
don't always understand it right the first time.
Sure.
Uh,
And our point really is to be able to begin to translate it for ourselves.
yes,
So that
Yes.
as we're looking at scripture, we can struggle with
yeah,
the
Yeah.
meaning. And that's the whole point, is to struggle with the meaning.
yeah.
I mean, the meaning in the words as they were written, not as
Mhm.
we've translated them
Mhm.
now,
Yeah.
but
And even to
um,
be able to humbly and carefully question the translator in the sense of like, why did this decision get made? And then define, I mean, you kind of bring to bear other research. It's like these are how
Yeah.
these words are used.
Well,
It's just being obedient to Second
getting-
Timothy, is it 2:15 or 3:15?
just trying
All
to get,
scripture is given by inspiration. of God.
No, it must be
Nine.
2:15. Study to show thyself approved unto God, a workman that needeth not to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth.
By the way, that phrase rightly
2:15.
dividing, that's the translation of one word, ortho timao. That means ortho is straight and timao. Did I get that right? Well, it means to cut straight.
right.
Yeah,
Is that also where we get orthodox?
yeah,
Yeah.
yes.
It would
Ortho,
be.
That's
it's-
straight glory or something like that?
No,
or-
no, that's not
It's
glory.
not,
It's
okay.
straight right teaching.
Right teaching. And my
Heterodox.
my father-in-law, who is fond of talking about the fact you need not only orthodoxy, but orthopraxy.
Right. Familiar. Yes.
Follow me there.
Yes.
Yeah.
He's got a
Oh,
good
yes.
point.
Mhm.
Yeah, by the way, this is my favorite lexicon. I've got one that's more technical and more thorough than this, but
Couldn't make out the text.
yeah,
In a
I can give you a copy
Yeah,
of
yeah,
that.
so the names, I can see that the names are not. I mean, the declensions are only important when they're somehow helpful in the translation. And given that we have articles in most
Yeah.
cases, that's all you really need.
That's
But so to ease my concern, you need the genitive. You explained why the genitive needs to be there. With normal nouns, is there some, I mean, I guess should just be trusting of this, is this is what we really need to know and not worry about it because it's a complicated answer.
Yeah. Well, the nouns we're learning
I need
now
to increase my
are the
base.
simpler ones, the ones that follow the rules. There's going to be exceptions to the
So,
rules. And
uh,
so-
a question, are we at the point where we're supposed to do the exercises for 7, or do you want to do that?
Yes.
We
I
are,
want
and
you to-
memorize.
Yeah,
and
I want
be
you to
ready
get
for quiz.
started and do as much as you can before next class. Also, memorize that paradigm of the article. No, that's fine. That's the assignment for next week. And we'll talk about the exercises next week and might even get close to being done with that.
I'm sorry, we'll talk about the exercise
Yeah.
next week.
Do at least the first page, which is the parsing and writing out the forms of the article and the warm up.
You want us to do those sections and we'll
Yeah.
cover them next week, because
We'll cover them next week and we'll go beyond that next week together. I mean,
Oh.
if you can go beyond,
yeah, I'll do it.
do what you can.
It's gonna be a busy week. Okay,
Oh, that's right. You're getting.
no,
ready
no, it's
for-
all good. Everybody has things to do. That's fine. I mean,
Is
I'm so.
everything on track for Carrie coming back?
Oh, yeah, praise God, it's working out. It's amazing. They're coming to measure the countertops tomorrow.
Oh,
I'm gonna have to make temporary countertops. I'm
Oh,
working
that's
on
what
that. And
Should be
just a lot, we need to close the prayer, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
So let me try, I want to write this down. So we're going to go over the chapter 7 workbook. Which parts?
He follows the same pattern every chapter. The parsing and on the same page is writing out the forms of the article. In other words, what I asked you to memorize. And then he's got a warm-up section.
Oh, in the forms of their,
Yeah,
their case endings, article.
The things that, so basically this is what we, okay, so. And if we haven't done the others, you're gonna go over them in class, because it seems like we should be doing them before we should be struggling through the exercise.
yes.
So the translations, are you gonna go over them next week in class?
I could,
Oh,
we
nice.
could work together on them, is what I'm, when I
Yeah.
say go over them, we can do it together.
Sure, that's
We'll kind of
better to do them
walk you
ourselves.
through it if you want. But
Okay.
yeah, it is better for you to do it yourself.
Okay, that is what it is.
Okay.
We,
Let's close in prayer. Father,